Carl Jung warned us, the moment an empath snaps, it's game over for the narcissist. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. In today's world, where empaths often carry the weight of silence while narcissists weaponize charm, Jung's wisdom cuts through the noise like a sword of clarity. Have you ever felt the moment you stop absorbing their pain and start reclaiming your power? That's not weakness, it's your awakening. This video isn't just a warning, it's a mirror. A mirror for those who feel deeply, love fiercely, and finally say, enough. What happens when the empath snaps isn't destruction, it's liberation. Comment below, I choose my peace. If you've ever walked away from emotional manipulation and stepped into your own light, let's begin this journey together. 1. The narcissist's mask is a survival mechanism, not confidence. Narcissists are not confident, they are terrified. Beneath their polished surface lies a primitive fear known as annihilation anxiety, a subconscious terror of psychological death. Their charisma is not power, it's camouflage. What looks like arrogance is often just the armor of someone who was once emotionally abandoned, dismissed, or deeply wounded. In childhood, when authenticity was punished or ignored, they crafted a persona, a false self to survive. This persona becomes their default identity, built not to thrive, but to avoid collapse. It is a constant performance, a rehearsed version of strength played on a loop to distract from the internal chaos they cannot bear to confront. At the core of their being is a single crippling belief: I am unlovable. And rather than risk this truth being seen, they manipulate, control, and deflect to keep others at a safe distance. Carl Jung taught that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering, and in the case of the narcissist, the substitution is a lifelong act. They swap vulnerability for control, connection for domination, and self-reflection for projection. Their inability to self-soothe creates a hunger for admiration that no amount of praise can ever satisfy. Their need to win is not about defeating others. It's about outrunning their own internal void. This makes relationships with narcissists profoundly disorienting for empaths, who feel everything with unbearable clarity. The empath senses the suffering, the fragmentation, the buried child inside the narcissist, but spiritual awakening is not about rescuing others from their masks. It's about recognizing when someone refuses to remove it, no matter how much love you offer. In today's world, where attention is currency and authenticity is rare, narcissistic traits are often mistaken for leadership or confidence. Social media amplifies this confusion, rewarding the curated self and punishing the real one. That's why the spiritually awakened empath must learn to see beyond appearances and honor intuition over illusion. When an empath finally snaps, it is not rage that emerges, it is clarity. The clarity that you were never supposed to carry someone else's wound, that their rejection was a shield, not a verdict, that their silence was self-protection, not proof of your inadequacy. In that sacred moment of realization, the empath doesn't fight back. They walk away, not to punish, but to reclaim. Spiritual wisdom teaches that presence is the greatest mirror. And once you stop dancing around the narcissist's insecurities, the performance collapses. The game ends because you're no longer playing. Your withdrawal is not weakness, it is power matured. It is the embodiment of the truth that you cannot fix, what someone refuses to face. And when you stop overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending, you become untouchable to those who feed off confusion. You become the calm that exposes the chaos, the mirror that reflects the unhealed. And in that stillness, something rare is born. Self-respect that no narcissist can fracture, because it no longer seeks approval in the eyes of someone who cannot see clearly. You no longer beg to be loved by someone who's forgotten how to love themselves. You become the ending of their illusion and the beginning of your freedom. Comment below, "I see behind the mask," if you're ready to reclaim your power through spiritual wisdom and self-awareness. 2. Behind closed doors, narcissists battle midnight panic. Behind the curated confidence and charm of a narcissist lies a hidden battlefield few ever see: a war that erupts most violently around 3 in the morning, when silence exposes the truth they've spent their entire lives avoiding. This is the hour when the crowd is gone, the applause has faded, and all that remains are the whispers in their mind accusing them of being a fraud. Beneath their outward bravado is a child frozen in shame, paralyzed by the fear of being unmasked. Their mind becomes a courtroom where they stand trial for every word spoken, every action taken, every glance received, obsessively replaying conversations and scanning their memories for imagined flaws. They don't do this for growth. They do it to survive the self-hate echoing through their inner world. Their rituals, whether it's compulsive shopping, meaningless sex, or mind-numbing substances, are not signs of power, but of spiritual disconnection. Desperate attempts to drown out the voice that says, "You're not enough." What they fear most isn't losing control of others. It's losing control of the illusion they've built to protect their fragile identity. Carl Jung warned us that people will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid facing their own souls, and the narcissist embodies this truth to a tragic degree. They wear arrogance like armor, but it is crafted from fear, not superiority. Their need to dominate, to manipulate, to be the center of every story comes not from inner strength, but from spiritual emptiness. They demand constant validation, not because they believe they're special, but because, deep down, they suspect they're worthless without it. And when they sense someone, especially an empath, might see through the mask, panic sets in. That's when the emotional manipulation intensifies. That's when the guilt-tripping, gaslighting, and silent treatment begin. Not because they're strong, but because they're terrified. They don't want you to see who they really are. And the more spiritually aware you become, the more dangerous your presence feels to them, because your clarity is a mirror they cannot bear to face. But the real shift happens when the empath, after enduring cycles of confusion and compassion, finally reaches the edge, not out of anger, but out of awakening. When the empath snaps, it's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. It is the moment the people-pleasing ends and the self-respect begins. It is the sacred point in spiritual development where you stop dimming your light to protect their shadow. You stop sacrificing your peace to keep the connection. You stop rescuing someone who was never drowning, only performing. And in that moment, the power dynamic shatters, because nothing is more threatening to a narcissist than an empath who has awakened to their own worth. You begin to set boundaries, speak truth without fear, and reclaim the energy you once gave away too freely. And suddenly, their tactics no longer work. Their silence doesn't hurt. Their chaos doesn't pull you back in. You become emotionally untouchable, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. Spirituality isn't about endlessly giving. It's about knowing when giving becomes enabling. Your growth is not betrayal, it is liberation. And as they spiral in the quiet corners of the night, still haunted by their unhealed wounds, you rise not in revenge, but in radiant peace. 3. Emotional blindness and the empath trap. Many narcissists live behind a well-crafted emotional mask, not out of confidence, but because they suffer from alexithymia, the inability to name and process their emotions. They don't truly feel their feelings. They just react to them. Fear becomes anger, and shame erupts as rage. This is not emotional maturity. It is emotional blindness. So what do? They unconsciously gravitate toward empaths, those with spiritual intelligence, depth of insight, and a rare aura of sensitivity, because empaths can feel what narcissists cannot. Empaths become emotional translators, decoding unspoken fear, absorbing suppressed pain, and attempting to create connection where there is only confusion. But what starts as intuitive understanding soon transforms into spiritual exploitation. This is not love. It's a dynamic of energetic imbalance, one where the empath becomes the source of nourishment and the narcissist the taker of light. And here lies the deeper wound. Intimacy, which should bring people together, feels like death to the narcissist. Vulnerability exposes the truth, and that threatens their carefully crafted persona. So they create a push-pull dance, luring the empath in with flattery and false depth, only to push them away the moment emotional closeness touches their unhealed core. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, warned that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And this truth echoes loudly in every relationship where the empath becomes the mirror, and the narcissist can't bear to look. When the empath tries to help, they're met with silence. When they love harder, they're met with withdrawal. And when they finally begin to wake up, they realize the connection was never mutual. It was emotional survival for one and spiritual sacrifice for the other. But when an empath snaps, it's not rage, it's clarity. It's no longer mistaking spiritual wisdom for suffering in silence. It's recognizing the manipulation wrapped in affection and the projection masquerading as intimacy. The moment an empath stops translating emotions for someone who refuses to learn their own language, the entire illusion collapses. That's when the dynamic ends, not with a fight, but with awareness. The empath walks away, no longer trying to heal someone who's weaponizing their pain. This is not just psychological freedom. It is a profound spiritual awakening. It is the reclaiming of power, of presence, of peace. True emotional intelligence is not rescuing those who exploit your compassion. It's setting boundaries that honor your worth. You are not here to be consumed. You are not here to be broken open and left to rebuild yourself alone. You are here to feel, to grow, and to be met with the same depth you give. Carl Jung taught us that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And when the empath does, the need to fix others disappears. The narcissist's game ends not in confrontation, but in quiet liberation. This is the sacred breaking point where the empath chooses clarity over chaos, truth over illusion, and spiritual strength over emotional servitude. Stay connected with our growing community of spiritual wisdom by subscribing to the channel. Here, we explore the deep emotional patterns that shape our lives and break free together. Remember, your empathy is not a weakness, it's your superpower. You are not here to be drained, but to rise. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss the healing you deserve. 4. Envy and control are not power. They're survival. Real power is not rooted in domination, but in emotional clarity and spiritual presence. Narcissists, however, confuse control with power because they live in a world shaped by fear, not truth. Carl Jung once said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking." Narcissists operate through a zero-sum lens. If someone else shines, they feel dimmed. If someone else succeeds, they feel diminished. That insecurity breeds envy, and envy becomes a weapon. They criticize those who love them, devalue those who support them, and undermine those who reflect their own lack of self. You'll notice this pattern in how they respond to your growth. The brighter you become, the more they try to dim you, not because they hate your light, but because they've never learned how to generate their own. Their survival depends on control, and their tactics of love bombing, silent treatment, praise, then punish cycles are not rooted in cruelty, but in a desperate need to regulate their inner chaos. This is not power. This is panic disguised as precision. They orchestrate connection through manipulation because genuine intimacy terrifies them. When you're spiritually awake, you begin to see this clearly. Control is not connection. Love does not need to be staged to be real. But to someone who's only known love through emotional conditions and psychological performance, freedom feels dangerous. This is where the tragedy unfolds, because in trying to control the relationship, they drain it of the very authenticity they crave. The more they manipulate, the less real the love becomes. And then they use that absence as proof that love was never real to begin with. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, built on fear and reinforced by spiritual blindness. Your role, especially as an empath, is not to absorb their wounds as your truth. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a form of intelligence, a reflection of your spiritual wisdom. In a world that worships control and punishes feeling, your emotional depth is revolutionary. But you must protect it. You must remember that just because someone fears abandonment does not mean you must abandon yourself to stay. Their fear does not justify your self-erasure. You cannot heal someone by becoming less of who you are. In modern life, this dynamic shows up everywhere. Relationships where you're constantly apologizing for existing. Families where love is conditional. Workplaces where charisma masks toxicity. When you start awakening, the veil lifts. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. So you stop shrinking. You stop explaining. You stop carrying the emotional weight of someone who refuses to feel their own. You realize that boundaries are not walls, they're doors. And you don't lock people out with them. You simply stop letting chaos in. The moment you honor your peace more than their projection is the moment the game ends. And not because you won, it's because you stopped playing. That is the essence of spiritual awakening. Not just realizing what you deserve, but refusing to negotiate it any longer. 5. Criticism is a tool to keep you off balance. Their constant criticism isn't random. It's calculated to keep you off balance, second-guessing yourself, and slowly detaching from your inner truth. It's a silent war, where every disapproving glance, every helpful correction chips away at your confidence and subtly teaches you to seek their approval instead of trusting your own voice. This isn't always delivered with open cruelty. In fact, many narcissists genuinely believe they are offering you guidance. But that's what makes it so insidious. They weaponize concern, wrapping control in the disguise of care. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's exactly what they don't want you to do. Because your self-acceptance threatens the power they hold over you. If you become anchored in your own worth, their ability to manipulate through emotional destabilization disappears. They can't dominate someone who no longer doubts themselves. The target is always your pride or your deepest insecurity, those raw places within you that still ache for validation. And every time you react, every time you get defensive or hurt, they take it as proof that they still have control. But here's the truth. Their criticism isn't about truth. It's about control. It's about making sure you stay small enough to be manageable. When you begin to see this dynamic clearly, you realize it has nothing to do with your growth and everything to do with their fear of losing emotional superiority. Spirituality teaches us to become the observer, to rise above reaction and step into inner alignment. When you finally stop absorbing their words like gospel and instead begin to see them as reflections of their own unresolved pain, something in you shifts. That shift is the birth of spiritual development. It's the moment when clarity replaces confusion, when your peace becomes more important than their praise. You begin to reclaim your energy, no longer pouring it into convincing them of your worth, but instead into grounding yourself in it. And that is when the empath snaps not in rage, but in realization. That moment isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet ending of a game you never agreed to play. You stop explaining. You stop apologizing. You stop shrinking to fit their comfort zone. You rise not to fight, but to walk away. Because you now understand that their need to correct you was never about helping you evolve, but about making sure you never outgrow them. And once you choose your spiritual growth over their approval, it's game over. Have you ever felt that criticism was used to confuse you, not help you? If you see it now with clarity, declare your truth in the comments. I trust my intuition, not their control. 6. They understand emotions, but cannot feel them. They know how to read your feelings, but they cannot feel them. That's the unsettling truth about many narcissists. They possess cognitive empathy, the ability to intellectually identify your emotions, but they lack effective empathy, the emotional capacity to actually feel what you're feeling. So when they look at you with soft eyes or offer comforting words, it may seem like they care, but something always feels off. That's because what you're witnessing is a performance of a carefully rehearsed act without any emotional resonance. Their intelligence allows them to mimic concern, but it's void of real connection. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And the narcissist does exactly that. Deep within, they know something is missing. They sense the emotional emptiness, the absence of real connection. But they have spent years, sometimes decades, constructing psychological walls so thick that even they cannot break through them. These walls were built to keep pain out, but in doing so, they also locked love away. You, as an empath, show up like a mirror they never asked for. Your energy, your rare spiritual intelligence, exposes what they've been hiding from: vulnerability, authenticity, and the soul's desire for connection. You don't just speak with emotion, you radiate it. And that spiritual presence threatens everything they've built their identity upon. While they cling to control and image, you move with feeling and depth. That contrast triggers them, not because you've done something wrong, but because you've done something real. Your emotional wisdom lights up the very darkness they've refused to explore. And suddenly, the illusion starts to crack. But here's the twist. The moment you stop tolerating the emotional disconnect, the moment you snap and say, "Enough," that's not your downfall. That is your awakening. That is the spiritual shift where the game ends, not for you, but for the illusion they've maintained. When the empath snaps, it's not rage, it's clarity. It's not revenge, it's revelation. You no longer beg to be felt. You no longer make excuses for being invisible to someone who only sees you when it serves them. You walk away, not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself. You honor your sensitivity. You protect your soul. You stop being a mirror for their false self and become a reflection of your own truth. This isn't a breakdown, it's your breakthrough. And from that moment forward, nothing is ever the same. You've just reminded them of the one thing they can't control: your inner freedom. Your spiritual wisdom becomes your boundary. Your emotional intelligence becomes your shield. And your awakening becomes the end of their performance. 7. When the mask cracks, narcissistic rage emerges. When the mask of control begins to crack, what erupts from beneath is not confidence, but terror disguised as rage. Narcissistic rage is not born from strength, but from a deep fracture in the false self. When a narcissist is criticized, loses control, feels irrelevant with age, or senses their manipulation no longer works, they suffer what psychology calls a narcissistic injury. This injury threatens their fragile identity, which is often built entirely on performance, praise, and illusion. And when that identity shatters, the rage that follows is not a reaction. It is a survival mechanism. This rage can take many forms: verbal abuse, emotional withdrawal, revisionist storytelling, or the cold act of discarding someone without explanation. It is not calculated evil, but a psychological emergency, a desperate attempt to restore control in a world that no longer reflects their grandiosity. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And this perfectly captures the narcissist's dilemma. They are not aware of what drives them, only that they are terrified of being exposed as ordinary, vulnerable, or wrong. What makes this dynamic so dangerous is that those on the receiving end, often empaths, tend to personalize the narcissist's collapse. They question themselves, try to fix the situation, or take on the blame. But in the realm of spirituality and spiritual awakening, the lesson is clear. This was never about you. The narcissist isn't attacking you. they are defending the illusion of who they believe they must be. Their identity depends on admiration and control. Your authenticity, your clarity, your refusal to collapse under manipulation becomes a direct threat to their survival fantasy. And so they rage not to destroy you, but to preserve the mask. The spiritual wisdom here is profound. You must stop trying to soothe someone who uses your compassion as a weapon. In modern relationships, where power games often replace emotional presence, the awakened empath must step back and say, "This energy does not belong to me." Empathy without boundaries becomes self-abandonment, and self-abandonment is the true cost of staying in a cycle of abuse disguised as love. The spiritual path is not about rescuing those who refuse to heal. It is about honoring your own light without guilt. When someone discards you during a moment of rage, rewrites history to make themselves the victim, or punishes you with silence, understand that you are witnessing their internal collapse. Do not absorb their storm. Do not mirror their madness. Your calm is their chaos. Your detachment, their undoing. In the words of Jung, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. So choose to awaken. Choose truth over illusion. Choose clarity over confusion. Let your spiritual intelligence guide you not into the flames of someone else's self-destruction, but into the quiet knowing that you are not here to be someone's emotional scapegoat. You are here to become whole. If you're still with us, type "I'm concentrating" in the comments. Your focus matters, and your feedback helps us build a stronger spiritual awakening community. Let's keep this energy of spiritual wisdom alive together. 8. The relationship cycle. Fantasy, devaluation, discard. The relationship cycle between an empath and a narcissist is not merely a toxic pattern. It's a deeply spiritual journey disguised as a psychological trap. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In the beginning, the narcissist doesn't approach with obvious manipulation. Instead, they arrive with a desperate need to secure attachment, flooding the empath with affection, attention, and validation in a phase known as love bombing. This isn't love, it's survival. The narcissist is terrified of abandonment and is clinging to the illusion of being worthy, seen, and adored. To the empath, this may feel like a spiritual connection, a cosmic encounter with someone who finally sees their soul. But it is actually the beginning of a cycle that threatens their emotional stability and spiritual development. As time passes and the empath begins to show genuine needs for emotional intimacy, reciprocity, and vulnerability, the narcissist's fear begins to rise. They don't see these needs as normal. They see them as dangerous because they threaten the carefully constructed mask they wear. Their identity is built on performance, not authenticity. And so begins the devaluation phase, where the empath is slowly pushed off the pedestal, criticized for being too sensitive, blamed for being needy, and made to feel like a burden simply for expressing normal human emotions. This psychological shift is more than confusing. It's a form of spiritual disorientation. The empath begins to question their worth, their reality, and their intuition. Yet this unraveling is where the deeper transformation begins, because once an empath learns to trust their inner voice and recognize that their emotions are not flaws, but signs of deep intelligence and awareness, they begin to awaken. But the final blow is the discard, This usually happens not when the empath fails the narcissist, but precisely when they offer genuine love. The moment the empath says, "I see you, I accept you," the narcissist panics. Why? Because they've built their entire identity around avoiding being truly seen. To be loved unconditionally means their mask must fall, and that is their greatest terror. So they sabotage the connection, discard the empath, and blame them for the collapse. Ironically, it is when the empath is most spiritually aligned, most honest, most open, that the narcissist retreats the fastest. Here's the truth. This cycle ends the moment the empath snaps not with rage, but with clarity. When the empath finally sees the pattern and walks away with dignity, they don't just break free, they transcend. This is the moment when spirituality becomes more than just an idea. It becomes embodied. True spiritual development begins when you no longer try to heal others to earn love, when you no longer trade your peace for someone's potential, and when you realize that boundaries are not walls, they're sacred lines drawn by your soul. So if you are an empath caught in this cycle, let this be your awakening. You are not here to carry someone else's emotional immaturity. You are here to remember your worth, reclaim your energy, and rise into relationships that reflect the truth of your being. Comment below, "I choose peace over patterns," if you are ready to break the cycle and step into your spiritual power. 9. Aging narcissists and the collapse of the mask. As narcissists grow older, the illusion they've carefully maintained begins to crumble. Their physical allure fades, accolades lose their shine, and the admiration they once manipulated no longer flows so freely. Without this narcissistic supply, they begin to unravel. What once gave them an inflated sense of self was never rooted in truth. It was built on performance, not presence. And when time strips away their props, they're left staring into the emptiness of their own unhealed psyche. Carl Jung warned us that the persona, the mask we wear to face the world, can become a prison when we confuse it with our identity. For the aging narcissist, the collapse of the mask is not just painful, it's terrifying. They're not just losing admiration, they're losing control over the only narrative they ever believed made them valuable. This internal crisis often manifests as heightened paranoia, obsessive control, and emotional volatility. The more irrelevant they feel, the more desperate they become to assert dominance. They micromanage, manipulate, lash out anything to avoid confronting the spiritual emptiness they've denied for decades. Their intelligence, once used to charm or impress, becomes a weapon twisting facts, rewriting history, projecting guilt. Their conversations become about power, not connection. And underneath it all is a soul too afraid to look inward. They cannot bear stillness because stillness reveals the truth. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But for the narcissist, that level of self-awareness feels like annihilation. Empaths, on the other hand, feel this decay long before it's visible. You notice the subtle hostility in their words, the manipulative undertones in their affection, the spiritual decay behind their charisma. You try to help, to understand, to rescue, but your love becomes a mirror, reflecting back everything they're trying to hide. You begin to suffer under the weight of their disconnection, and yet you stay until one day you don't. The empath snap isn't loud or violent. It's silent, resolute, divine. It's the moment you reclaim your soul from the cycle of pleasing someone who only loved your reflection when it served them. This moment, the moment you walk away, is the moment the narcissist faces the very terror they've spent a lifetime escaping: themselves. Without someone to project onto, the aging narcissist spirals deeper into isolation. They become haunted by the very silence they once used as punishment. Their need for validation becomes frantic, but fewer people are listening. And the ones who do stay see through the act. Spiritual wisdom reveals that aging is meant to be a return to essence, a shedding of ego, a softening into truth. But for those who never cultivated an inner life, aging becomes a spiritual reckoning. The narcissist, without the applause, is forced to meet the self they abandoned long ago. And often, they don't recognize who's staring back. 10. Empaths must prioritize strategy over sympathy. You've been conditioned to believe that empathy means endurance, that compassion means tolerating chaos. But the truth is, without strategy, your empathy becomes a trap. Narcissists don't seek love. They seek control masked as connection. And empaths, driven by their need to heal and be understood, often become the perfect supply. The relationship is not built on love, but on a subconscious agreement. The narcissist avoids exposure, and the empath avoids abandonment. This cycle of dysfunction thrives on your silence, your forgiveness, your hope that they'll change. But Carl Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. The narcissist projects their darkness onto you, so they never have to see it within themselves. And the empath, until they awaken, absorbs that projection, mistaking it for their own reflection. This is where the spiritual awakening begins, when you realize you are not responsible for their healing, their rage, or their repeated betrayals. The moment you stop needing validation from someone who weaponizes your heart against you, you reclaim your energy. You don't need them to understand your pain, because their power lies in your constant explaining. Stop explaining. Stop defending. Stop justifying your boundaries. The boundary itself is enough. It is your energetic line in the sand, a declaration that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. The gray rock method isn't emotional coldness, it's strategic stillness. It's the act of becoming unresponsive, not because you don't care, but because you've transcended their control game. You become boring to their chaos, invisible to their manipulation, immune to their bait. And that neutrality is your power. The spiritual wisdom here is in the detachment, not the fight. Your role is not to win the argument, it's to exit the arena entirely. Healing is not found in getting closure from a narcissist. It's found in no longer needing it. Let the wound close without their apology. Let the silence be your sanctuary. Let your lack of reaction be your loudest response. The narcissist's greatest fear is not confrontation, it's indifference. When you stop feeding their need for attention, their illusion collapses. And in that collapse, you rise not because you proved them wrong, but because you remembered your worth. This is not just about psychology, it's about energetic sovereignty. You're no longer living from the wound, you're living from the wisdom it gave you. You now understand that your spirituality is not measured by how much you sacrifice, but by how clearly you can walk away from what depletes your soul. You are not abandoning them. You are finally choosing yourself. And in doing so, you break the cycle not only for yourself, but for every empath who's ever mistaken survival for love. 11. True recovery is inner work, not fixing them. True recovery doesn't begin by dissecting the narcissist's behavior. It begins the moment you turn inward and ask why you tolerated it in the first place. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And in this spiritual awakening, you realize that the narcissist was never the main character of your healing story. They were a mirror, showing you the wounds you were too busy caretaking to confront. Every time you excused their coldness, minimized your needs, or overextended your empathy, it wasn't because you were weak. It was because you had been conditioned to confuse love with sacrifice. But spirituality is the art of remembering. Remembering that you were never meant to be someone's emotional regulator. That your role was never to fix chaos in hopes of receiving breadcrumbs of validation. You were meant to heal the abandonment wounds that whispered, "If I love harder, they'll stay," and face the subconscious belief that love must be earned through pain. Once you begin this inner work, your energy shifts, boundaries become second nature. Self-respect replaces overgiving, and your nervous system no longer seeks the highs and lows of emotional volatility. The narcissist's control loses its grip, not because they change, but because you do. You stop magnetizing those who feed off your light, because your light is no longer dimmed by self-neglect. In this stage of spiritual development, empathy becomes sacred, not something to be exploited, but something to be shared with those who reciprocate. You understand that true compassion includes yourself, that healing isn't about becoming harder, but about becoming whole. And through this wholeness, you step into your power, not with rage, but with clarity, not with bitterness, but with sovereignty. You realize you don't need to fix them. You need to honor you. This is when the game changes. Because when an empath heals, sets boundaries, and protects their peace, the narcissist loses their influence. Not through confrontation, but through disinterest. Not through revenge, but through evolution. You ascend, and in doing so, you leave behind the cycles that once felt like home. This is the essence of spiritual wisdom, not the need to control others, but the courage to transform yourself. Let that be the lesson. Your empathy was never the problem. Your lack of protection around it was. Now, you know better. Now, you choose differently. Thank you for watching Spiritual Wisdom. If this message spoke to something deep within you, trust that it wasn't by accident. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So if you felt the shift, the awakening, the moment when the empath rises, honor that power. Don't let it fade. Like this video to affirm your truth. Share it to support others on their journey. And subscribe to our channel to continue walking this path of spiritual wisdom together. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment that might just change everything. Until next time, stay aware, stay empowered, and stay true to your light. 6 mysterious signs you might possess a rare aura that few ever experience. As Carl Jung once said, The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what if who you truly are carries a rare, almost otherworldly energy that few can understand, let alone possess? In today's video, we'll explore 6 mysterious signs that point to an aura so rare, it silently commands attention and shifts the energy of every room you enter. These signs aren't just spiritual curiosities. They're roadmaps to deeper self-awareness, spiritual growth, and personal transformation. As you listen, reflect on your own journey. Do you recognize these traits within yourself? If so, comment below with "I feel the shift," or share your thoughts with our community. Let's begin this powerful unveiling together. 1. A presence that silently shifts the room. They don't chase attention, yet attention seems to orbit around them. There's no need for loud entrances or dramatic statements. Simply by walking into a room, something in the energy field recalibrates. Conversations pause. People glance without knowing why. It's not about beauty, charm, or charisma. Those things can be mimicked. This presence can't be. It's ancient. It's earned. It's the result of someone who has walked into the depths of their inner world, faced their shadow with unflinching honesty, and returned whole. Carl Jung called this spiritual metamorphosis individuation, the moment a fragmented self becomes unified not by rejecting darkness, but by integrating it. And in this unity, the aura becomes rare. Its power doesn't need validation. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply is. Calm, grounded, immovable. This presence doesn't rise from perfection, but from the courage to be fully human. Those who carry this rare frequency often bear the weight of emotional history. They've been through spiritual awakenings that shattered illusions and burned away everything superficial. They've walked through betrayals, endured loneliness, and navigated seasons of not belonging. But instead of becoming hardened, they became clear. And it's this clarity that sharpens their energy like a blade of truth. They don't entertain small talk or ego games. They can sit in silence and still be felt. Their aura speaks louder than their voice ever could. And it's not because they want to be mysterious, but because they no longer need to explain themselves. Their inner peace has become their native language. Their healing has turned into spiritual wisdom. And their stillness has become a mirror, one that often makes others uncomfortable, because it reflects what they've avoided in themselves. In a world addicted to performance, rare aura people are a paradox. They don't perform. They are. They listen deeply. They move slowly. They observe without judgment. And when they do speak, their words feel like code soft, but unforgettable. You walk away from them changed, not because they tried to change you, but because their presence awakened something dormant in you. You remember who you are when you're around them. But this gift is double-edged, because just as they attract souls hungry for truth, they also repel those addicted to illusion. People either love them or fear them. There is rarely an in-between. And that's the price of spiritual clarity. It disrupts the status quo. It can't be controlled. It can't be manipulated. It's sovereign. These individuals are often misunderstood. Their silence is seen as arrogance, their solitude as sadness. But nothing could be further from the truth. They've simply stopped explaining their existence. They've stopped apologizing for their depth. They've stopped betraying themselves just to be liked. Instead, they've chosen alignment over acceptance, truth over comfort, and energy over appearances. They live by vibration, not obligation. They respond to the soul, not ego. And that's what makes them dangerous, not in the violent sense, but in the revolutionary one. Because their very presence exposes what is false, not with anger, but with undeniable authenticity. And in a world drowning in noise, they've become the quiet storm that changes everything. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the energy shift without saying a word? If you've experienced this silent power, share your story in the comments below so others can understand its mystery. If not, comment, "I will observe," to start becoming more aware of your own presence. Let's explore the rare aura within together. 2. People instantly open up to you. People don't just talk to you, they unravel. In grocery lines, cafes, workspaces, and quiet corners of life, strangers and loved ones alike seem to pour out their secrets, confessions, and emotions as if your presence somehow gives them permission to finally be real. It's not because you ask the right questions or know all the answers. It's because your aura holds a rare frequency that feels like truth itself. You don't push, pull, or judge. You simply exist with a kind of silent openness that mirrors back to people what they've been running from: grief they never processed, anger they never voiced, desires they were taught to suppress. And while that might feel confusing or even overwhelming at times, Carl Jung offered a powerful insight into this phenomenon through his concept of projection. When people encounter someone with a spiritually awakened presence, someone who has faced their own shadow and no longer hides behind illusion, they unknowingly project their hidden self onto that person. You become a mirror, not the kind that flatters or distorts, but one that reflects back what is true, raw, and unresolved. This is why people feel disarmed around you. Your energy doesn't just comfort them, it exposes what's underneath. It doesn't just calm the room, it rearranges it. Your spiritual development has fine-tuned your ability to hold space without absorbing chaos. You've likely walked through your own emotional fire, confronted your own darkness, and alchemized it into light. And now, whether consciously or not, people feel that. They sense your depth, your clarity, your refusal to live on the surface. And in a world addicted to noise and performance, that kind of authenticity is both magnetic and terrifying. Some will be drawn to you like moths to a flame, aching for the safety your presence provides. Others will resist you, distance themselves, or even act cold, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your energy threatens their illusions. This is the invisible burden of having a rare aura. You walk through life triggering transformation without saying a word. And that's why spiritual boundaries matter. Not every emotion you absorb belongs to you. Not every story needs to be carried. Just because people open their soul to you doesn't mean you're responsible for healing it. Your role is not to save, but to reflect. Not to fix, but to witness. This is the essence of true spiritual wisdom, not martyrdom, but mastery. So when someone says, "I don't know why I'm telling you this," take it as confirmation of your spiritual maturity. You're not just a safe space, you're a spiritual mirror. You awaken others simply by standing in your truth. Let your presence continue to be a portal for growth, but protect your own light fiercely. Because the deeper your aura reaches, the more intentional you must be about what and who you allow into it. This is the unseen path of spiritual development, learning how to be a sanctuary for others without abandoning your own soul in the process. If people often open up to you without knowing why, comment below. I am in the flow of connection, because your rare aura might just be the reason. 3. Hyper-awareness of energetic undercurrents. You walk into a room, and before anyone says a word, you already know who's hurting, who's pretending, and who's barely holding it together. This isn't a trick, and it's not magic. It's the result of a deep inner intelligence, a form of spiritual wisdom that Carl Jung believed only a few ever fully develop. Your awareness stretches beyond the surface. You feel energy, mood shifts, unspoken tension, and repressed pain with stunning clarity. While others rely on facial expressions and tone of voice, you read between the silences, sensing what isn't said, noticing the emotional currents running beneath even the calmest conversation. This hyper-awareness is a hallmark of those with a rare aura, a presence that disturbs shallow waters, not because you're disruptive, but because you are awake in a world that thrives on numbness. But make no mistake, this level of spiritual perception doesn't come without a price. Because when you're constantly absorbing emotional data, social interaction can feel like energetic warfare. Small talk is exhausting. Fake smiles hurt. Crowded rooms feel like psychic noise. You don't just interact with people, you absorb them. And unless you've learned to regulate your boundaries, every conversation can leave you feeling like you've given too much. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Your rare aura stems from your willingness to explore your unconscious mind, to confront shadows most people avoid, and to integrate the parts of yourself that were once fragmented. This journey creates a field around you with an energetic frequency that others can sense but rarely understand. They may call you intense, mysterious, or even intimidating, but that's only because your presence reveals what they've worked hard to suppress. You serve as a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. People either evolve in your presence or run from it. And if you've spent a lifetime shrinking to make others comfortable, hiding your emotional depth to avoid judgment, or pretending not to notice what your intuition screams at you, then it's time to reclaim your gift. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's your compass. It allows you to see through manipulation, sense danger before it arrives, and connect on a soul level with those who are ready to meet you there. Spiritual awakening isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's simply realizing that you no longer have the tolerance to betray yourself for the sake of harmony. Sometimes it's knowing when to walk away without explaining your truth. And other times, it's choosing silence over performance, solitude over pleasing, and energy over words. Your intelligence lies in your discernment. You don't need proof to trust your instincts. The body knows what the mind can't articulate. You're not paranoid. You're perceptive. This is the art of energetic awareness, knowing when a room is off, when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes, when someone says, "I'm fine," but their aura screams otherwise. You are fluent in the unspoken, and that's rare. But you must protect that ability with everything you have, because those who do not understand it will try to use it, drain it, or silence it. You don't need everyone to get you. you need to get yourself. And once you do, you'll stop explaining your energy and start choosing environments that honor it. Your rare aura is not just a feeling, it's a force, a frequency born of self-awareness, healed trauma, and spiritual intelligence. And those who truly see you won't be confused by your silence or threatened by your depth. They'll feel safe in your presence because you are one of the rare ones who listens with their soul. If this sign of hyper-awareness resonates with you, like the video, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep uncovering the depth of Carl Jung's spiritual insights together. 4. You trigger people without saying a word. Just by being real in a world full of masks, you become a silent disruptor. Your authenticity shines so vividly that it naturally exposes everything that is fake or hidden around you. People don't always realize it, but your presence unsettles them, not because you are loud or demanding, but because your energy carries a frequency of spiritual truth that cannot be ignored. It speaks a language beyond words, vibrating with the power of someone who has faced their own shadows and embraced their whole self. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And when you live from that place of inner truth, you force people to confront what they've been avoiding in themselves. Some will find this magnetic. They will be drawn to you as if your light wakes something dormant within them. But others will feel threatened, even hostile, because you represent everything they've repressed. Your presence becomes a mirror they're not ready to look into. You don't have to preach, persuade, or perform. Your existence alone shakes the ground beneath their illusions. Jung warned that society fears wholeness because wholeness demands integration, and integration disrupts conformity. The modern world rewards masked success without depth, popularity without purpose, smiles without sincerity. But you refuse to play that game. Your spirit won't allow it. When others suppress their pain to keep the peace, you bring it to the surface by simply existing. That's the power of spiritual awakening. It sharpens your aura until it becomes a piercing light that reveals what others have hidden in darkness. And so, even if you say nothing, people feel something shift when you walk into the room. Your silence speaks, and it speaks volumes. You challenge others to be real, to stop performing, to meet themselves at a deeper level. And that, for many, is terrifying. So they may distance themselves, mock you, criticize your choices, or even try to make you doubt your path. But understand, this is not personal. This is energetic. You trigger people because your energy reveals their inner fragmentation. Still, your role is not to shrink. You were never meant to water yourself down to make others feel comfortable. You are here to expand, to stand as a living example of wholeness in a fragmented world. Every time you're misunderstood, every time someone turns cold or combative, know that your energy is doing sacred work. You are shaking their false foundations, not out of malice, but as a call to evolve. You are a mirror they didn't ask for, but deeply need. And while many will turn away, the ones who stay will grow. You are here to lead by energy, not by explanation. Your rare aura is not a burden. It is a spiritual signal, a quiet revolution that inspires others to return to themselves. So continue to be real. Continue to walk with grace and unwavering truth. Let your spiritual wisdom speak through your actions. Let your presence be a reminder that authenticity is not just powerful, it's necessary. If this message resonates with something deep inside you, repeat after me. I am receiving this message from the universe. It's speaking directly to my soul. I trust its truth completely. 5. Solitude becomes sacred. As your spiritual development deepens, you begin to notice a profound shift in how you relate to the world around you. The noise, the constant stimulation, and the need for external approval no longer satisfy you. You find yourself naturally distancing from superficial interactions that once filled your time. There's a quiet ache not of sadness, but of transformation as your soul begins to crave something richer than casual conversations and energy-draining environments. You no longer chase attention or validation because your energy is becoming more refined, more selective. The solitude that once felt like exile now becomes sacred ground. This isn't withdrawal out of fear. It's the necessary step for inner expansion. In solitude, you're no longer performing for the world. You're listening, healing, awakening. You're tuning into a frequency that most people are too distracted to hear. Carl Jung understood this when he emphasized that individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires stepping away from the collective noise. It's in that quiet where you meet the parts of yourself that have been waiting to be seen, not by others, but by you. What used to be labeled as isolation is now the womb of your transformation. You begin to understand that growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silent nights spent with your thoughts, the quiet mornings where you feel the pulse of the universe beating inside you, the deep moments of self-reflection where clarity cuts through confusion like a blade. And while others may interpret your stillness as disconnection, you know it's alignment. You feel your energy becoming magnetic, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because you're vibrating from a place of authenticity and spiritual clarity. You're not escaping the world. You're preparing to re-enter it with deeper awareness and power. Spirituality, at this level, is no longer a concept. It becomes your lifestyle. You begin to value your inner peace more than being understood. You protect your time, your space, your mind. You become deeply intentional about who and what you allow into your energy field. And in this sacred solitude, you start to realize that the most powerful presence you can have is the one that does not need to announce itself. This is the paradox of the rare aura. It doesn't shout, but it shifts rooms. It doesn't seek approval, yet it leaves impact. Solitude, therefore, is not a weakness to overcome, but a strength to cultivate. It's the crucible where your rare energy is tempered and your inner wisdom is born. In this space, you're not losing anything. You're gaining everything: spiritual strength, emotional resilience, and the clarity to walk your path without apology. This is where the real transformation happens, not in the spotlight, but in the sacred silence that only the brave are willing to embrace. If solitude has become a sacred part of your journey, you're not alone. Subscribe to spiritual wisdom and stay connected with others who understand the power of quiet transformation. Here, we honor rare auras, deep insights, and the beauty of spiritual awakening. Remember, your stillness is not emptiness. It's divine alignment. 6. You begin to see yourself differently. You stop seeing your difference as something to fix and begin to recognize it as sacred design, a deliberate mark of spiritual intelligence. You're not here to blend into a world that feels too loud, too shallow, or too disconnected from truth. Your aura has always been rare, not because you're trying to be unique, but because you've quietly chosen the road of inner truth when most people run from it. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's exactly what your energy does. It reflects a soul that has dared to look inward without flinching. You begin to realize you were never meant to play small, apologize for your presence, or mask your intensity. Instead of questioning why you see through the surface, feel things deeply, or sense what others cannot explain, you start to honor these gifts as signs of your spiritual awakening and your connection to something beyond the physical. Your aura isn't just different, it's disruptive in the most divine way. It confronts the falsehoods people live by. It stirs the unspoken. It reveals the hidden. You walk into rooms and shift the atmosphere, not because you demand attention, but because your energy exposes what's fake, what's unaligned, and what's asleep. This kind of presence isn't loud, but it's undeniable. It's not charisma, it's clarity. It's not dominance, it's depth. And the more you own that, the more others begin to feel something change in themselves when they're around you. Some will admire it, some will misunderstand it. But either way, your very existence becomes a mirror that forces others to confront what they've buried. And that's not something everyone is ready for. But this is where the sacred responsibility begins. You're not just here to shine, you're here to protect your light. You start setting boundaries not out of bitterness, but out of spiritual necessity. You no longer let guilt manipulate your kindness. You stop explaining your path to people who have no interest in understanding it. You honor your intuition more than the noise. You walk away from people who drain your energy, not because you don't care, but because you finally realize your frequency is not meant to be diluted. This is emotional mastery, spiritual wisdom, and energetic discipline, all wrapped into one rare sovereign presence. And as you protect your energy, you begin to radiate even more powerfully, not through force, but through presence. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable and start expanding into the fullness of who you are. You no longer seek permission to be seen, because you understand now that your energy is the permission. Your aura whispers, you can be whole too. It speaks to people's unlived potential, their forgotten truths, their suppressed emotions. You become a walking awakening. And it's not about ego, it's about embodiment. You're not trying to impress, you're trying to remember. To remember who you were before the world told you to be less. To remember the version of yourself that always knew they were here for more. This is when you begin to live differently, speak differently, love differently. You realize you are no longer someone searching for worth. You are someone radiating it. And that, above all else, is why your aura is rare. Because while others are still trying to find themselves in the noise, you've chosen to become the quiet power that wakes others up. And remember, if any of these signs resonated with you, it's not by accident your journey towards spiritual awakening may already be unfolding. Carl Jung taught us that rare energy often comes from deep inner work and self-awareness. So, trust your intuition, honor your presence, and keep exploring the mystery of your own soul. If you found this video insightful, please like, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more content that supports your spiritual growth. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an awakening moment. Until next time, stay luminous.